Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My guest tonight has spent over 20 years practicing pediatric and adolescent medicine, as well as counseling teens and their parents. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics and on the National Board of Advisors for the Medical Institute. She's written a book, now in paperback, called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, 10 Secrets Every Father Should Know. Joining us via satellite from Grand Rapids, Michigan, is Dr. Meg Meeker. I thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Raymond.
I want to start with, why is a father so important to the formation of a girl?
Well, for a lot of different reasons, really. I think that primarily daughters need a dad to anchor her. And it's interesting that a father anchors a daughter really from the time of infancy on up through adulthood in a very different way than a mother does. And we really haven't paid much attention to that. There is something about the masculine mystique, if you will, that we have sort of trampled on, particularly in the media over the last decade or so, that needs to be revived because girls do need it. There's a strength and authority that comes with a father that daughters really need.
Do you think that's part of the problem here, the media impact and feminism over the last couple of decades, 4 decades or so, pounding this message in that men weren't important, you're being a patriarch, you're being authoritarian? Hasn't that made a lot of men sort of push back from the table?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it, you know, going to an all-women's college in the 1970s, sort of being right in the middle of the sexual revolution and the feminist movement. We really saw men become marginalized, good men become marginalized. Men are the butt of many jokes in greeting cards. Look at advertising industries, sitcoms, movies. Men have, particularly fathers, are viewed very much as idiots, and from where I sit in helping a lot of girls and boys as well, this is devastating because they need strong fathers terribly. And I think that particularly women in homes, the mothers also have pushed men to the side, whether they realize it or not, saying, I know how to do this better, get away while I parent and raise the kids, we don't really need you. Terrible message for dads.
Yeah, and men are often portrayed, and certainly fathers in the media, as, you know, the pliable galoot, you know, who's over either trying to get to a game or hanging out at a bar, you know, the slacker dad, which is, you know, certainly not the ideal. Let's talk for a moment about this toxic culture and the challenges it presents, particularly to young women who are encountering, who are facing questions about their self-image, body image, all of that. How toxic is this culture in your estimation? Let's start there as a professional, as a physician who deal with those who are contending with it and victimized, I think, in many ways by the culture.
Right. It's enormous, and I think that it's getting worse as every year goes by. My particular concern, Raymond, is the hypersexualization of young girls. Really, and this starts from about age 6 on. If you look at the clothing that the girls wear from the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old on, clothing manufacturers are marketing smaller and smaller sexy clothes to girls. Movies in particular, magazines, and so on and so forth, are really telling our girls over and over during the day that you aren't really anybody unless you're sexually charged, extremely attractive to a boy, let's face it, that's what they are, and that sex should be a part of a big part of your life, and it should be in the front of your brain all the time. I'm very, very concerned about that, particularly because in the past 20 years we've seen an explosion of emotional difficulties and disturbances related to sexual activity amongst girls, and as well as sexually transmitted infections. So I'm very, very concerned about that.
You know, I kind of, when I was reading your book, I thought, you know, this is the Hefnerization of America that we're seeing played out here. You know, Hugh Hefner's kind of ideal has been writ large in advertising, in fashion, in news, everywhere. I mean, you look, anywhere you look, really, you have this hyper-sexual ideal being forced in the faces of men and women, and it puts, you know, it puts us all in a difficult position. You say here, though, that it is the father who stands, if you will, as a barrier, as the protector against this toxic culture, and his daughter. Explain that.
Well, I think that if you look at the healthy growth of a healthy sexuality in a young girl, femininity is really defined and matured and honed as it stands against masculinity. And that a healthy sexuality of a girl grows in the face of a healthy, strong father. We talk a lot about peer pressure. Oh, it's peers that are making girls dress this way. It's peers that are making girls start having sex at 13, 14. It really isn't. It's dads. Not that a dad is making a girl be sexually active, but a dad's lack of involvement and understanding of what she's up against helps her, encourages her to just go where the train is going, I say, and that's towards sexual activity at a very young age.
You know, in the book you mention, in your practice, you've seen the impact of the sexualized images, whether they be of nudity or simulated intercourse or whatever, in films. When young girls see that, what is the impact on them, emotionally and otherwise?
Well, of seeing a lot of the images of very skinny women with enormously large breasts who are very scantily clad. The message to the girls is, and I can't emphasize this strongly enough, because a lot of your viewers may be our age, my age, over 40-something, and say, oh, what is the big deal? You know, kids have always been sexually active. The message is that our kids get through magazines and clothing companies and the Britney Spears, Paris Hiltons is, if you aren't sexually charged, you're really nothing. And this feeds into a girl's sense of self, that if she isn't sexually active, then gee whiz, maybe she isn't worth a whole lot. That leads her to be more likely to be depressed, to develop an eating disorder, to do poorly in school. The list goes on and on. So it has dramatic ripple effect in a girl, if you will. I love that. At one point in your book, you mention the story of a father who every night when he put his daughter to bed,